What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always by my man in the corner, producer Nick Belsky. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talk, or subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. I apologize that we are a little late today. I tried to test out a new background. I've been telling Nick for probably 3 months now, hey, dude, I'm going to switch the background after the podcast today. And then today, before the podcast, decided we're going to switch the background. We're getting there. It is nowhere near done, so I apologize for the work in progress. But, hey, things of beauty, man. They take time. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they got some news today. TJ Watt, finalist for Defensive Player of the Year. We're going to dive into his odds. And if he could pull it off one more time this season, despite a sack drought there at the end of the regular season and the playoff game, new wide receiver that the Pittsburgh Steelers might have a shot on. And somebody's urging them to make a pretty big splash coaching hire. And we're going to dive into why that is not a bad idea for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's not terrible outside today. My friend woke up, it was 4 degrees, jumped up to like 30. That's a great day in January in Pittsburgh. How you feel, my friend?
I'm a little cold as well. Even down here, when I woke up and I saw that it was 11 degrees down here, I said, oh, yeah. Pennsylvania is probably either in the negatives or certainly under 5 degrees. So glad to hear that I'm right. I always like to hear that, but certainly trying to stay warm, which is why I'm wearing a sweatshirt for one of the few times that I actually do that on this podcast.
Yeah, that is true. For how much I do wear sweatshirts, you almost never wear a sweatshirt. Wow, it is chilly down there in the DMV, huh? Well, good for you. Everybody needs I feel like cold's good for the body. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a guy that's like
me of my childhood. Yes.
Maybe. Yeah, I guess that's the key. I don't know. I'm like, I look at it and like people will be like, oh, you're going for a walk right now? I'm like, yeah, dude, it's pretty much the same thing as an ice bath. So, they say that's fantastic for you. Go walk outside for 5 minutes. It's the same thing. Let's dive into some Pittsburgh Steelers football here. We'll start with TJ Watt. TJ was named a Defensive Player of the Year finalist once again. No surprise by anybody. But the competition, I want to say, is fierce, and maybe more fierce than it's ever been for TJ Watt. Not saying that it's been more difficult or hasn't been more difficult. He has been faced with tasks that he couldn't even overcome, no matter how hard he played, cough, cough, last season. This year, it seems more like I've never seen a race, at least in the recent future, where it is just so up in the air. You honestly have no idea who's going to, which is fun. You could go Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. Everybody's got one side, and they're kind of feeling that it's going to happen one way or another. This one is just straight. Anything could happen. I have no idea. Excited to see what does happen. His competition is the one and only Myles Garrett. Philadelphia Eagles linebacker Zach Bond, Bengals defensive end Trey Hendrickson, and Denver Broncos cornerback Patrick Surtain. TJ's a guy where you can make the argument for him even at the end. Even with the lack of sacks, he's somebody who, an entire offense has to focus on this guy. I think the Steelers' downfall certainly hurts his opportunity to walk away as Defensive Player of the Year this season. I think the fact that he didn't really do a ton in that time hurt his chances as Defensive Player of the Year. I also think the way other people ended the season may have hurt his Defensive Player of the Year odds. But that being said, I'm not out on TJ. I think there is very much so a chance that he walks away with his second Defensive Player of the Year award. I have a ranking. I'll break it down, then I'll ask you yours. If I had to guess who walks away with it this season, it is Patrick Surtain, because he's young, he's flashy, he hasn't gotten one yet, and he's a superstar in the NFL that, well, if you're a superstar in the NFL and you play defense, you have to get one. That's just what happens. If Micah Parsons played 16 games this season, he would be Defensive Player of the Year. Pat Surtain is my favorite for the award, followed by Trey Hendrickson, TJ Watt, Zach Bond, and rounding out the list is Myles Garrett. Maybe Myles and Zach Bond change, but I think Zach Bond has been low-key an absolute monster this season. You have a rankings, a prediction on how this one turns out as well?
Yeah, I agree with you in the fact that this is as close as I think I've ever seen a race with this many potential candidates. Nobody really pulled away at
No.
the end of this. You have Trey Hendrickson, who did have that multi-sack performance in week 18 to kind of solidify himself as the sack king this year. But when you look at Trey Hendrickson, is he going to get votes over guys like Myles Garrett, over
Yep.
T. Watt, even over Pat Surtain, who I think has a little bit more name recognition over a guy like Trey Hendrickson. So I think this is going to be really close. I agree with you. I think it's Surtain's Defensive Player of the Year award to lose. I would think that in the voting, though, Myles Garrett comes in as a close second. I just feel
Oh.
a lot of people, a lot of voters are going to look at that, especially considering he's one of the only of these five that have campaigned for it outwardly. I think
Yes.
a lot of people simply sit there and say, yeah, he's probably higher on the list. So I think it's probably in likelihood Surtain, then Garrett, then Hendrickson, then Watt, and then Zach Bond.
Okay. Okay. I like that. I like, to be honest, Trey Hendrickson is my should be defensive player of the year guy in the NFL this year. I think he was an absolute monster on an absolutely terrible defense. What do you give TJ's shots to actually pull this one off?
If we're going percentage wise, I would still put it up around 35 because I
Okay.
think that name recognition is there. And I think a lot of people will look to the fact that he did get double teamed and chipped and everything schemed against him, but he was still able to make a lot of impact plays, right? How many forced fumbles did he get? And of those forced fumbles, how many did the Steelers recover? Almost every single one of them. So
Yeah.
I think that will play into his favor. And I think he will get some recognition, especially because I think some of the voters will think he probably should have gotten it last year. But I do think that it's great that we're still talking about him being top 5 in the NFL in Defensive Player of the Year rankings in a year that we are all consensus saying is a down season for TJ Watt.
Yeah, that's the craziest part is you look at it and you go, in my eyes, TJ didn't have a good year. Like this is TJ, where were you, man? Could have did a lot more. I think even he acknowledged he could have done a lot more.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you're sitting here going, easy defensive player of the year finalist, possibly favorite right up until the last 3 games of the season, where you're going, TJ's probably going to win this, and then you go, maybe not, maybe not. I still think there's a chance, and I think if the dust settles and people are thinking, TJ is the guy, he could still end up being the guy in Pittsburgh. I think that's a real possibility. I would say 35 is a good number, 35-40% for TJ Watt to somehow pull this one off. It's a toss in the air. And just like you said, there are going to be people, there are going to be voters that are saying, it's a real big toss up and we definitely screwed TJ last season. Let's make sure. Yeah, exactly. It's an apology. Andrew says if a TJ wins the award, it's an apology for last year. And I agree. I think that's a possibility. All right, let's talk wide receivers. Okay. The Pittsburgh Steelers are on the hunt for a wide receiver. They have obviously probably created their board. They have made it very known that they need a wide receiver, that is a top priority this offseason, that they didn't have enough talent. And nobody's hiding the fact that they didn't have enough talent at wide receiver. But how they go about finding one, where they go about getting one is the question. And everybody's got their favorites. Everybody's got their opinion. Oh, they're going here. Oh, no, they're going here. NFL draft, free agency, trade, DK Metcalf, get rid of George Pickens, keep George Pickens, Roman Wilson, not Roman Wilson. Personal favorite, Ben Skoranek, but that's okay. Probably not going to happen. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody has a different alternative or an alternative route that they can take. This offseason, the one thing is for certain, and that is that the Pittsburgh Steelers have almost a 0% chance of walking into 2025 with Van Jefferson and Mike Williams as their number 2 wide receivers for the upcoming season. So how do they go about it? Many people think it's free agency. I still stick with the fact that if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, I am calling T. Higgins the moment I can call T. Higgins. And chances are I'm calling him beforehand, because if you think in the NFL people aren't already talking, you're crazy. If you are not on a team, you're telling me that just because you can't negotiate doesn't mean that Omar Khan doesn't have your agent's number and they can't make a phone call or two, see how the family's doing. You're telling me Drew Rosenhaus only talks to NFL GMs for 2 weeks out of the year? No chance, pal. No chance. I would imagine the Pittsburgh Steelers have their board. T. Higgins is on the top of mine. I don't know who's on the top of theirs. Pro Football Focus believes that who should be on the top of this guy's is the Pittsburgh Steelers. They believe that Buffalo Bills star wideout and former Cleveland Brown Amari Cooper is the best candidate, or at least the Steelers are the best candidate for him this offseason. They write, quote, the 30-year-old Cooper will have his fair share of suitors on the open market, likely teams looking to add quality veteran leadership to the receiver room. What better place to provide that presence than a team with a history of animated receivers like Pittsburgh? The Steelers were actively shopping for receiving help at the trade deadline, reports linking them to several options, including the former Brown. Pairing the even-keeled Cooper with George Pickens would be a prudent move to calm the Steelers' receiver room and split defensive attention. So, first off, a lot of little jabs at George Pickens in that one. A lot of them. And I read it this morning and went, oof, it's 6:15 a.m., dude, and things are already getting spicy. Damn. Second, I don't mind it if you're keeping George Pickens. If the plan is to keep George Pickens and go with Amari Cooper, I don't hate the idea. Really at all. I really don't. I think Amari Cooper is still a pretty decent wide receiver. He finished the season with only 14 games, 10 starts, 547 yards, and 4 touchdowns. That is with half Jameis Winston / Deshaun Watson / Dorian Thompson Robinson / learning a new Buffalo Bills offense / only playing 14 games because you were injured, and I believe it was a foot injury. I'm not 100% there. Feels like to have half 1,000 yards, not a bad place. To be the guy for the Bills in the AFC Championship, not a bad place. And then to add the veteran leadership, to add the even-keeled wide receiver, to add a guy that maybe is a DeAndre Hopkins at this point in his career, dominant wide receiver who's in his 30s, probably isn't as dominant, but still very reliable. I don't think it's a bad move. You have to keep George Pickens. It comes with 2 rules if you're going to do this. You have to keep George Pickens. And secondly, you have to draft a wide receiver. And it doesn't have to be first round, but you have to draft a wide receiver. This has to be Roman Wilson, rookie, Calvin Austin, George Pickens, Amari Cooper. That's what this has to be, because you might only get Amari for 1 year. Amari might not be that good. If he is, great. You just figured it out. But it's more of a risk than anybody else on the open market. And while I don't hate it, I'm not opposed to the possibility of it. You have to make sure you have a backup. I think Amari Cooper's fine. On the other side of this, and I want to give you the floor on Amari here, but first, in this same list, T. Higgins, which is a shot right to the heart on this one for this guy. T. Higgins free agent comparison, Kenny Galladay, who you just went, no, dude. That's just brutal. That is absolutely brutal. So let's hope it doesn't happen. If it does, I was pushing for the good T. Higgins, not the bad one. And I'm going to stand by that. Amari Cooper, you like it?
Yeah, he's certainly a name that I would put on my list, and not at the top of my list, but he would make sense. Honestly, a lot of the things that PFF were saying there, despite the fact that they chose violence against George Pickens with a lot of backhanded compliments there, I like the fact that Amari Cooper brings in that veteran presence. It's almost like a more talented Darius Hayward-Bay when it comes to his role in the locker room. And especially if you go out and you draft Luther Burden or Emeka Ibuka, you're going to probably lean towards giving them more targets than you're going to give Amari Cooper. Because as you mentioned, it's a risk. I mean, this guy's numbers fell off of a cliff this year, and that fell off immediately after he turned 30. I understand he dealt with injuries, but at the same time, I think that Father Time is undefeated. It just gets people at different times. We look at Devontae Adams. He's kind of avoided it up to this point. It seems like it's starting to catch up to Amari Cooper. Now, part of that might be he's playing in Cleveland. Part of that might be he tried to learn a new offense in Buffalo, an offense that right now is not keying in on one receiver or another receiver, more so highlighted around the quarterback and finding whoever's open in every single play. So maybe that leads to why he only had 547. But over the age of 40 or over the age of 30, I'm still a little wary about bringing in Amari Cooper to pair with George Pickens. I think that, like I said, would he be on my list? Certainly. Is he a cheaper option than trying to go out and get a Devontae Adams? Is he a cheaper option than trying to go out and sign T. Higgins? Yes, and it allows you to do things in other areas. But I do think that he'd still be lower on my list simply because you have started to see that decline from him this season.
I agree. He's not my first option. He's probably not my second. I think a first round wide receiver is my second option. T. Higgins is very clearly my first. I think honestly, he might be my fourth option because my third option might be trading. You could go get a DK Metcalf. I think Tyreek Hill would be so awesome in Pittsburgh. Like Tyreek Hill and George Pickens together you would never know. You would have no idea what was going on in both on the field and off the field. Anything could happen at any moment. It would be incredible. I think that would be fantastic. Who else is on the open market that I'm totally blank? People are talking Garrett Wilson. Sure. If you want to go to Garrett Wilson, sure. I think a trade would be third. Amari Cooper would be fourth, but I'm not opposed to Amari Cooper. Like if that's where you end up later down the road, fine. I think that the Steelers need to have contingency plans. They should be pushing as hard as they can to avoid contingency plans. But last year, their contingency plan was Mike Williams at the trade deadline. And unfortunately, that was just the worst contingency plan you could have outside of just avoid it as a whole. So you have to have better ones. Amari Cooper is not a terrible contingency plan where we stand right here. I see people like, oh, the Chargers should go get T. Higgins. If your competition as the Pittsburgh Steelers is the Los Angeles Chargers, you do everything in your power to go get T. Higgins. You don't let him go to the Chargers because that is not he's going to win a championship. Okay, we're gonna be right where the Chargers are a year from now. I get it. I understand the situation, but you're not going to win a championship.
It's the same exact situation, just in Los Angeles.
Exactly.
You're going to a team that is run first on the playoff bubble and has higher expectations that they typically fall short of. That's exactly what you're doing.
Exactly. So at that point, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, do not let him go there. Just go win it and go get T. Higgins. I'm overpaying for T. Higgins this offseason. I'm very comfortable saying it, and I'm feeling very okay with it, especially if you don't let Justin Fields hit the open market and you sign him beforehand. I love the idea. All right, let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and their coaching situation here. They've been urged to make a little bit of a splash this offseason. That maybe they another Brian Flores type. Well, Ray Fittipaldo of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, great writer, well-trusted, well-versed in the Pittsburgh Steelers, says, quote, some assistants will go. They just haven't been announced or leaked yet, which is, good to know because we sat here saying, I don't know who's going to leave. And every day that passes, less and less. As far as major moves go, maybe Tomlin could get one of the coaches who doesn't land a head coaching job. The Browns added Mike Vrabel last year as a consultant. The Steelers should do that this year with some coaches who are currently out of a job. I personally, if we'll start the conversation here, think that is a fantastic idea for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think it's perfect. If the Pittsburgh Steelers go and get a consultant or even two consultants and say, you are our next Brian Flores, see if you can make it work. Because I think you could, but it comes with this. I would believe that the Pittsburgh Steelers have or should have more intention to add a defensive consultant on the defensive side of the ball than the offensive. I would look at it simply and say, go get the next Brian Flores. Go get Gerard Mayo, who, I get it, just got fired, but was a good linebackers coach in New England, well trusted on Bill Belichick's staff for a little while there. Feel like that's a decent option to come in here and help a little bit. Go get, I don't know, who else is out of a job that is a defensive coordinator and who could use a job. Go get a Larry Foote who's interviewing for the Lions DC job, and if he doesn't get it, bring him in for a much bigger role in Pittsburgh. I don't know who the options are. What I know is this. Mike Tomlin, it is not about going and getting a consultant or an assistant or a bigger coaching name so that you could plug and play wherever. It is about simply having guys that you can trust and trusting them. Because you don't need Mike McCarthy on the offensive side of the ball, which would be the one, right? If you're thinking offensive consultants, offensive coaches, Mike McCarthy would be the guy that you went out and got, that you just said, Mike, you're from Pittsburgh, come back home, be the offensive guy for the Steelers, help Arthur Smith. I mean, we're talking potentially the biggest, also possibly the worst offensive coaching staff to ever exist, but could be fantastic if it works out. But that's the thing. None of it works out if Mike Tomlin doesn't take his foot off the gas and say, you know what, guys, you drive. We're good. I'm going to sit back and I'm going to allow my coaches to coach, because that's the biggest part of this entire offseason. Nothing has anything to do with the moves you make or the changes that are in place if you as a head coach are going to control it all and not be able to control it well. That's what Mike Tomlin does. Is why wasn't Justin allowed to do more? Because Mike Tomlin told him he wasn't allowed to. Why does the defense go to soft zones in moments where everybody knows don't go to soft zone? Because Mike Tomlin doesn't want to. Everybody blames every other coach, but it comes down to Mike T pretty much all the time. And I think Mike Tomlin is fine as a head coach. Go let your coordinators, go let your new consultants, whoever, be coaches. Because I would love to see what Arthur Smith brings as a real offensive coordinator with Justin Fields. I would also love to see what a bigger, better defensive mind would bring to the other side of the football if him and TA could work together and Mike Tomlin kind of took a step back. What happens there? I don't know, but I would love to see it. And I think that is the proper way to go about it. I'm open to consultants if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, but it comes with the side note of let them do their job and don't just hire guys so that Mike Tomlin can run every piece of this show like he currently does. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I certainly think that when you watched this team the last month of the season and into the playoffs, it was pretty apparent that while Mike Tomlin's message might not have been stale, the actual game plan, the actual decisions and the ideas on the defensive side were. Everything was stale. So in this instance, if you're bringing in somebody who's going to kind of shine a different light on your defense, shine a different light on some of the weapons that you have on that side of the ball, or if you do it on the offensive side, new ideas is never a bad thing, especially when this team has been mired in mediocrity over the last 5 seasons, 10-7, 9-8, 8-8. If somebody comes in like a Robert Saleh, who still hasn't found a home, and he tells you, hey, maybe you should be doing this instead, and you're actually going to listen and allow that to happen, then yeah, that's always a good thing. New ideas are always a good thing as long as you have the right person to accept, ingest, and then put into action those ideas. Is Mike Tomlin that person? We'll have to wait and see. It worked with Brian Flores, so it worked to some degree already. So if you go out there and do it with a Robert Saleh, if you go out there and do it with a Larry Foote, if you do it on the offensive side with a Mike McCarthy, it's only a good thing. New ideas, I like. Consultants, I like. But Mike Tomlin has to be open and receptive to it, and he has to utilize it correctly.
Yep, I agree. That's what this all comes down to. Like, I want to spend almost a full episode going through how the Pittsburgh Steelers fix their team and get into 2025 and become a contender. And I think I have a pretty good plan laid out on how to do it. And at some point, I do want to give that plan to you guys, possibly tomorrow. I don't know. But at some point, I have the plan. I put it together. Obviously, easier said than done. But it's a blueprint to figure it out. And you want to know what number one on that list is? Back the hell off and just let it happen. Just let your guys coach. Become Dan Campbell. Become Nick Sirianni. Become these guys that are the greatest motivators you could think of, who allow their coaches to become coaches. And that's what you get. Mike Tomlin doesn't have a coaching tree. Dan Campbell's got 2 already. That's crazy. You want to know why? Because Dan Campbell just sits in there and gets everybody to run through a wall and then lets Ben Johnson draw up the best offensive plays humanly possible and lets Aaron Glenn sit down and run an absolutely dominant defense. That's what happens. So the start to any of this is, Mike Tomlin, back off but I do think it's a good move. And if you got to go get somebody on the defensive side of the football is where I would start. You go get a guy like Mike McCarthy. Why not, dude? Why? Who? Sure. Sounds good to me. Like if that's what you want to do is pair Arthur Smith and Mike McCarthy. I don't see how that it either blows up in flames and it's terrible because both of them are washed, or it's absolutely fantastic and Justin Fields somehow just got the greatest offensive coaching duo in NFL history. It's one of the two. And I'm okay with testing the waters there. I truly am. Will it happen? I don't know. We'll see. But if Rafe Apollo is suggesting it, there's something behind it to say like, yeah, right. Like this isn't just like a shot in the dark. This isn't some random person saying
it's not a shower thought. It's more than just a shower thought.
Yeah, there were words. There was conversation. Something sparked this, and that's interesting. If you had a guy on top of your head, do you have somebody on top of your head that you go and get?
I'd go and get Robert Saleh. There's a reason.
Oh, yeah, very true. All right, yeah, very true.
I mean, if you need somebody, because right now you look at the defense and you say, all right, they have the talent, the personnel is there. You just need somebody to get the best out of them. And right now, what Tomlin's doing, what Terrell Austin's doing, it didn't get the best out of this defense late in the season. Maybe if you bring in Robert Saleh, he has that one adjustment, or probably more so like 30 to 40 adjustments, because these guys come very well prepared. That turns this defense into high expectations, underwhelming results, to high expectations, high level results. Maybe that's all it takes.
I agree. If he does not get the Jaguars job, call. And like I said, dude, I had somebody, I'm not going to expose them, but I had somebody text me. I was like, yo, is that Robert Saleh's thing? Is that sourced? Did you hear that? And I was like, yeah, but like, no, like it was in a phone call. Yeah. Like it was a very side conversation of a phone call that once it was said came with the, chances are he's going to be a head coach or he's going to end up back in San Francisco. And I was like, I got that. Like I picked up on that the second that you said it out loud. So you never know. You never know with these head coaches. That would be a move. I just think it's worth exploring if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, but it has to come with letting coaches be coaches. And then you fix so many things, or you don't, and you figure it out from there. Like that's the best part. Everybody asks all the time, why does Mike Tomlin have terrible coordinators? We never get an opportunity to know if they're good or not, and if they suck, you get rid of them. But the Steelers just hire ones and let them rock forever because Mike Tomlin's controlling the game. So they don't really know they don't even care if they're good. If you're really good and you found somebody, I mean, that's a different, what you could do in those moments when you have something like that, it's a different level of coaching and teamwork at the same time. All right. That's everything on our agenda there. I want to dive into all your questions to make sure that we hit them all as we move through. Today's what? Thursday? I almost said hump day. Today's Thursday already, huh? Wow. Wild week. All right. We'll be back to answer all your questions. First, we're going to take a quick break here from our boys over at DraftKings. All right, football fans, things are getting real. Whether your team has made it to the conference championship or not, there's still plenty of ways to enjoy the games. Get in on the action right now with my partners at DraftKings Sportsbooks. They're offering all new customers $200 in bonus bets instantly by just betting $5. Don't let this slip away. Download the DraftKings app now and sign up using our code ALLSTEELERS. The crown is yours. Stay in on the action and use your $200 in bonus bets on DraftKings same-game parlays for a shot at an even bigger payout. Combine multiple bets together from the same game. Love the thrill of live betting? DraftKings has got you covered. Bet live in-game progress right as they are happening, making watching the games that much more exciting. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use my promo code ALLSTEELERS and bet just $5 on any wager and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code ALLSTEELERS only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Shout out our boys over at DraftKings. Dude, how sad is it that we only have 3 more football games to bet on all year round? all year long.
It's depressing. We talked about it. I think it was, I can't remember if it was on air or off air, but we talked about it last week and we said, oh, there's 4 games. We have the national championship, which check, and nice to win in that one. I think both of us were on Ohio State. And now we just got championship Sunday. And I mean, I think you can bet on the Pro Bowl games, but I'm not a sicko, so I'm not going to do that.
What are you even betting on? What is
Miles Killebrew to do well? That's all I would bet on.
Yeah, true. Hero right there. Shout out that guy. Also, TJ Watt. Not did you blank for a second there when that news came out? Did you go, TJ Watt's injured? What's going on there? Because my brain immediately went, what injury are we talking about? And then I realized there was like 6 of them.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. TJ, Warrior.
Yeah, I just remember on Christmas Day, JJ talking about something with his wrist. And I was like, if there's anything, he's going to be like, I can go where I want to go. So I'm not going to the Pro Bowl games.
I wouldn't go to the Pro Bowl games anyways. Who cares? A week later, he's going to be in New Orleans. Like, he doesn't need to go to Orlando. Let me tell you that it was nuts on Christmas because I was the only one covering the game. Like, it's Christmas. Nobody else is working. I mean, all the other beat writers, but our entire staff had the day off. And I had no idea that DJ had a thumb injury until I went on Google, like, middle of the third quarter, middle of the fourth quarter, and everybody's talking about TJ Watt's thumb injury. And I was like, did he get hurt in the game? Like, I'm staring at him right now. What's going on? It was a very confusing moment for 10 minutes because you're just so lost up there. You don't hear anything from the broadcast the entire game. So you don't pick up on any of those nuggets. I think they should all send them to everybody in that press box, but they don't. It was a wild time. All right. Let's dive into your questions. We're going to end the show the same way we do every single day, so make sure that you're tossing them in the chat. We'll get to all of them before we head out of here. Nick, I'm going to toss it to you. What do we got?
Yeah, let's kick things off with 42 Steck, who says, yo, Noah, did you ever ask and find out where we can get that Pitt D hat? I actually started seeing a lot of ads for it popped up on Instagram. So it's called Residency. If you go to residency.com, it's a 3 instead of an E for the second E. That's where you can get that Pitt hat.
Thank you, because no, I totally forgot. And that's on me. I apologize, guys. I should have asked, and I didn't. So that's on me. But shout out Residency.
Let's go to Madeline, who says, also, does anyone seem to think that Russ is just campaigning for his job next year? What do you think are the chances they retain Russ and Justin, and who would be QB1?
I do think that Russ is almost campaigning for his job and just like keeping the light on for whatever reason he's keeping the light on for. That's how I look at it, is there's a very good possibility Russell Wilson is strategically mentioning and keeping himself alive in the Pittsburgh Steelers conversation. So hopefully he does end up with the job. You know what I'm saying? Maybe at the end of the day, you just speak it into existence. I'm positive Russ believes in that. Who would win the job? I don't think they retain Russ. I think they keep Justin Fields. That's where my mind is right now. Who would win the job if they're both here? If they're both here, I would guess Russ does win the job. But I have a hard time believing Russ is going to come back. I would guess Justin is the QB1 next season.
All right, let's go over to Carl Spackler, who says, fun one for you. What's more likely, since it's a Thursday? Steelers trade up in the draft to get the next franchise QB over the next 5 years, or the Steelers' next head coach lasts under 15 seasons?
Oh, I mean, the Steelers' next head coach lasting under 15 seasons has got to be the answer here. I think there's no chance the Steelers trade up to get their next franchise quarterback unless they're trading up to get Jalen Milroe, which I saw a story today that was like, trade back and get Jalen Milroe. I'm like, where is Jalen Milroe even going? How do we know that he's going to be that late in the draft? I mean, there's a much better opportunity or chance that the Steelers' next head coach is a total miss. I mean, that it's just like when Ben retired, like the grass most likely is not greener on the other side if you ever were to move on from Mike Tomlin.
Let's go over to Peter, who says, would you have drafted Quinyon Mitchell over Troy Fautanu, knowing what you know now?
I mean, knowing what hindsight's 2020, like that, I would, knowing what I know now, Quinyon Mitchell would be the move. To be honest, though, like, I mean, you traded at that point, you had a corner. You had Dante Jackson. So you didn't need a corner. Like Dante was the guy, and I had a lot of faith in Dante. I mean, to be honest, I went back and looked at Dante, and until the back injury started really beating him up, Dante had a pretty good season. He looked pretty all right for a while there, and then he got beat a couple of times, and they were in big moments. I'm giving him that, but Joey got beat too. So it's not like Dante was the worst corner on that team this past season. I think going back, if you're in that situation, Troy Fautano still makes a lot of sense. I liked Quinion Mitchell more, but I also think that, Quinion Mitchell's an absolute stud. There's some studs in this year's draft too. I don't know if you saw it, but good old Benjamin Morrison entered the draft today. So we're here. We're rolling. I think 2020 is Quinion Mitchell, but if you're in that situation, if you're sitting there at pick 20, Troy Fautano made all the sense in the world.
All right, let's go over to Madeline again, who says, what's more likely, Justin Fields starts at quarterback, or we finally have a healthy offensive line?
Oh, we might have to do like a fan section, like the viewers send us the what's more likely on Thursdays to keep this thing rolling, because there's a clear pattern that we're missing here. I mean, Justin starts a quarterback by a billion. I would guess I would put Justin starting a quarterback over a lot of things this offseason, because I really do believe that he's going to be the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2025.
All right, let's go to Darian, sensing a theme here. Says, what's more likely? The Steelers keep Russ and draft Jalen Milroe, since it was said that scouts love him, or we keep Justin and draft or sign another quarterback to work behind him.
Justin and draft or sign another quarterback to work behind him. I would guess if I had to guess what's going to happen, Justin Fields is going to sign and the Steelers are going to draft a Jackson Dart in the second or the third round. A guy that maybe he turns out to be nothing and maybe he turns out to be something. A Will Howard, that type of situation. That's what I had to guess. Unless Jalen Milroe falls to them at 21, then I could see them doing something crazy like that. And I think that would be electric, to draft a quarterback in the first round and have Justin Fields at 26 years old and just say, like, both of you guys may be absolutely terrible in the long run, but both of you might actually be the greatest quarterback that we've had in 5-6 years. So it's 50-50. I almost said in the last decade, but I would never disrespect Ben like that.
Yeah.
I think it would be electric. What's more likely, Justin, and you draft a quarterback behind him.
All righty. Let's go over to Grayson, who says, hey, Nick and Noah, I have a random question for you guys. Do you think that Ben Roethlisberger will be a first ballot entry into the Hall of Fame? When he retired, he was top 5 in almost every quarterback stat.
Ben Roethlisberger will not. I don't know who. Do you remember who else retired with Ben? It wasn't Brady. No, maybe it was Brady. Brady might have retired the same year as Ben Roethlisberger. It was 5 years ago, because this has to be, we have to know this before I can make this statement, because I can't be saying this and then people being like, oh, Tom Brady retired the same year as him.
2 years, or different years. Ben retired in 2022 and Brady retired in 2023. Who
are the big names that retired in 2022? That's important, because you never know, and it could be somebody absolutely bonkers that we just didn't pay attention to, or that like retired super late. Like, did AB ever retire? Who knows? It's guys like that. But if it's not anybody big, Ben Roethlisberger is not only a first ballot Hall of Famer. I'm hoping before I say this, we got a name.
I'm not finding any other names here. I mean, the year before, there's a lot of big names. The year before, there's Drew Brees, Vinatieri, Rivers, Jason Witten, Greg Olson, Julian Edelman.
Those are the big ones. Okay.
Yeah.
If we don't got any of those, which I don't believe they have, Ben is not only a first ballot Hall of Famer, but the first one selected into the Hall of Fame. He's the easiest choice on the ballot, where everybody just consensusly goes, you are, who do you got?
I mean, Larry Fitzgerald is up there.
No, he's not above Ben.
Gronk is up there.
I don't think he's above Ben. I think he's up there, but I don't think he's above. He might be close to Ben.
And
He
that's
might be
about
close to Ben.
that's
Yeah.
about it.
If those are the three, Ben gets in before Larry. But if those are the three, Ben is still probably the top of that ballot, if not number 2 on that ballot. Nationally, everybody will care about Gronk because that speech will be electric. But Ben's gonna be right up there too. He's one of the first guys in the Hall of Fame in his class.
All right, let's go over to Noche, who says, why not bring back Mike Williams? I think he would work out a lot better with a full training camp under his belt with the Steelers.
Maybe, but I'm not taking a risk on that. It's not a Mike Williams is bad. I'm not taking a risk on that. You could go get a better option. You could go get a bigger name. You could go get a better star. Go get them. Go get 2 of them. Go draft somebody and then re-sign Ben Skoranek to top it off. And those are your 5 or 6. If you want to bring back Mike Williams as like a training camp competition that maybe he makes the roster, maybe he doesn't, cool. If he's open for that, if you're open for that, sounds good. But if this is a bring back Mike Williams as your number 3, no. The answer is no. You can't take a chance on something like that. It's got to be a guaranteed this is going to work out.
Let's go to Suki Knows Best, who says, hey, AST, if Justin is the QB1 next year, how do you feel about him playing Chicago in a revenge game like Russ was supposed to this year?
Yeah, I think that he balls out, and especially against Caleb Williams. You're telling me that Justin Fields wouldn't put up 400 rushing yards in that game? It doesn't even matter about passing yards. It would be insane. That's how I feel about it. It would be awesome, especially in Chicago, Windy City. Hopefully it's not November when you go and it's nice and early in the season so that it's not freezing cold and we can all go there and enjoy ourselves. Yes, I think it would be awesome. I think it would be so awesome, and they would win by 30.
All right, let's jump to Tyler, who says, I know we don't keep Najee most likely, but could you see him getting signed by a team with a good offensive line and having a 1,500+ yard season?
Easy. I mean, I said it throughout the season, and I still remain with the same thought. There is a real possibility Najee Harris signs somewhere like San Francisco or, I mean, as Philadelphia's backup. I don't want to say Dallas. They don't have a good offensive line anymore. But a team like that and just LA and just goes off. Like I'm talking is the guy. You're telling me Jim Harbaugh wouldn't lose his mind at a shot at Najee Harris? Like he watched that man go off at Alabama for years. And to say that's our guy, he's never going to miss time. He's a true football player. Yeah. I think I'm not saying it's a definite, but I do think that there's a good possibility Najee has himself a season next year. I still think you get rid of him. I still think you go in a different direction. But I'm not saying Najee by no means is a bad wide receiver or a bad running back, excuse me.
He's a decent wide receiver too. Let's go over to Killicam, who says, is there enough cap space to keep both George Pickens and then get T. Higgins?
Yeah, I'm not. I would find it very hard to believe that the Steelers extend George Pickens where we stand right now. I'm not going to say it's no, but I don't think that the Steelers are looking at George Pickens and saying he's a definite long-term guy. I just don't think that that's their thought process. Things could change. They could be thinking differently than what I'm hearing and what I'm saying and the thoughts I'm having. But if I had to guess, George doesn't get a contract this offseason. So, yeah, you could sign T. Higgins and then figure out George later. So, and it would make sense that way.
All right, let's go over to Diana, who says, hey, Noah and Nick, is Christian Kirk still on the table? I know we were about to pull a deal off with him last year before he got injured.
Yeah, I don't know why he wouldn't be. I do believe Christian Kirk is on the table, is a name to watch. I wouldn't guess he's super high on the list. Who the Steelers were looking at last deadline compared to who they're looking at right now is going to be a little bit different. But I would guess Christian Kirk is still on the list somewhere. I would guess Cooper Kupp is still on the list somewhere. All of those big guys that the Steelers were making phone calls for, I would imagine Deebo Samuel. I would imagine Deebo Samuel is on the list this offseason as well. I don't think they're as high because you're going to have guys like Amari Cooper and T. Higgins. You're going to have a draft class, but I do think that they would be on the list, yes.
Let's go over to Cody. Sorry, you want to go to Grayson next? Let's go to Grayson. He says, "Hey, Nick and Noah, I have the biggest hypothetical ever because it will never happen. But what picks and players would a team like the Steelers have to give up to get Patrick Mahomes away from the Kansas City Chiefs?"
First off, did I click on this question?
You did.
Okay. I'm using a new mouse and it's kind of freaking out. So
I was wondering why you kept selecting questions. I was like, all right, cool. He wants to answer this
on that
next.
quick though. You were real. I kept doing it. I did it more than once.
You've done it 3 times now.
I have no idea that I've been doing it. So awesome. Shout out. I apologize if I missed somebody's question. We'll try to go back to them. It would take every first round pick that the Steelers will have for the next 10 years. TJ Watt, George Pickens, Mike Tomlin as a defensive coordinator, and probably 50% of the Pittsburgh Steelers franchise ownership to give straight to whoever owns the Kansas City Chiefs for Patrick Mahomes. If I had to guess, I don't think there's a price on Patrick Mahomes. I think if you called the Pittsburgh Steelers and said, "Hey, we'd like to hear about Mike Tomlin," you'll get the phone hung up on you. And I think if you called the Kansas City Chiefs and said, "Hey, we'd like to talk about Patrick Mahomes," whoever the GM is right there, which I don't remember who that is, would laugh so hard that he'd probably piss himself. And I would guess everybody in the building would have that same reaction. So I don't think there's a real price on that one. Every first round pick for the rest of time would be where that started, actually.
All right, let's jump down to Broderick Wallace, who says, "Why do we have the most expensive defense?"
Because you paid them. I don't know. Because guys truthfully, at the time, it all worked out. TJ Watt was worth every penny. Minkah Fitzpatrick at the time was worth Minkah Fitzpatrick money. Cam Hayward remains worth Cam Hayward money. Like, that all made sense. It's now in hindsight, like, Minkah's now worth the money. Patrick Queen is a big question mark. Cam is there, fine. Alex Highsmith's worth it, but he keeps getting injured and he's got to stay healthy. Like, that's why is you have those guys worth $1 billion. I mean, those 3 alone are worth over $90 million. I'm pretty sure. Like, that's a ton of money a season going into 3 dudes when one of them isn't contributing the way that he needs to as a superstar.
Yeah, I mean, how we got here is simple. You had players that were worth re-signing on the defensive side of the football. You haven't had players that are worth re-signing on the offensive side of the football. That's just the way it's been for the Steelers. And because they've leaned on their defense so much, it creates more opportunity for defensive players to stick around and get paid.
Yep, exactly. And if it works out, awesome. If it doesn't, you're in situations like you're in with Minkah right now.
Yep. Let's go to Cody Silva, who says, "Did you guys see the lineup of teams that we play next year? Tomlin is going to get all the smoke next year. There's like 4 winnable games. They need to change something, or they might get a top 10 pick in 2026.
If there is one bet that is guaranteed every single year, it is the Pittsburgh Steelers over 8.5 games won. Every single year. You could put them up against every playoff team imaginable, and chances are you're going to walk out of there with 9 wins. But just to point out more than 4, Cleveland, which if Cleveland doesn't get a quarterback, that's 2 wins, not just one. Potentially. Cleveland, you're going to win 1 against Baltimore. You're going to win 1 against Cincinnati. That's 3. You're going to beat New England. I'm sorry, but they're not there yet. They're a good team, but they're a good coach. But they have nobody. Like, that team is Drake May and nobody. Christian Gonzalez. There's 4. I'm telling you, you're telling me, like, unless I'm wrong here, unless I'm just blowing smoke, you're telling me Justin Fields in Chicago, is it like you wouldn't pick the Steelers in that game? I'd even with Ben Johnson, I'd pick the Steelers in that game. That's 5. Where else Detroit is scary, but
they beat the Chargers this year. It's going to be a similar team next year.
You could beat the Chargers. I don't know who else is there. You play the Jets.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe you play the Giants, right?
No, they do not play the Giants next year.
No, but
they play the Seahawks. Is there a team that's not in the NFC North?
Who could be another win? I take the over on the 8.5 every year. Take the over on the 8.5.
Let's go to 42, who says, do you expect the Steelers to re-sign Dan? I would imagine that's Dan Moore.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think Dan's going to go somewhere else. I think he'll get an opportunity to compete for a starting job on another team. Steelers are going to move Broderick to the left side and Troy to the right, and they're going to see what happens. I do see them bringing in another swing tackle, not a starter worthy, but a guy. Kelvin Beachum is a good name. There'll be a couple others that are out there that I could see them approaching this offseason.
Let's go to Walter, who says, would you sign all of the defensive holes in free agency and just draft all offense?
No. No, I don't think so. I think you could get a corner in the NFL draft that could be a stud, and that's the way to go cornerback wise. But I also think you could re-sign somebody. If I had to guess, they're going to re-sign Dante and draft somebody. You can get a third safety in the draft that I personally think is the best way to go about this, because you use a mid-round pick on a safety and you hope he turns into Nick Cross. You hope he turns into any of these guys that have emerged into like a Deshaun Elliott, where it's like, that's a stud right there, and you can replace Minkah with him if Minkah doesn't turn out to be a superhero in 2025. So I think you could get a safety there. Defensive line depth, you want to go young. You want to go young in defensive line depth. And that's a hole, is the defensive line needs some depth. They have none. Those three spots I think you could fill in the NFL draft. I think you could get wide receiver help in free agency and the NFL draft. A running back I would draft easy. A swing tackle I would sign in free agency. And a quarterback I'd go get Justin Fields. So, and I think that's their holes right there. So I would do that. I would mix it up in both sides.
All right, let's go to Andrew, who says, do you think it's more likely that the Steelers make a splash coaching hire a la Asala, or they trade George Pickens?
They trade George Pickens. This one made me think for a second, but they trade George Pickens. If I had to guess, George Pickens is most likely gone in this situation. I have a hard time believing they sign another Brian Flores type before they get rid of George Pickens. I would go George Pickens.
All right, let's jump down to Mike, who says, do you guys think they'll finally start to move TJ around the defensive line next season?
Yeah, and I think TJ is going to be pretty open to the move too. He was not. Like, you have to understand that it was a two-way street there. The Steelers wanted TJ to succeed on one side, and TJ feels way more comfortable on his side than he does the other side. So it's a two-way street. TJ is now very open to saying, last year sucked. Let's figure it out. I'll move. And an offseason with JJ, figuring this whole thing out, I got hope that he pulls it off. So I do think TJ will move quite a bit next season.
All right, let's close things off with Nick, who wants to know if hell freeze is over and Tomlin does have a losing season. Do you think Rooney finally starts considering a replacement for Mike Tomlin?
If the Pittsburgh Steelers have a losing season next season, Mike Tomlin gets one more year after that. And if he doesn't win and turn this entire thing around and get his franchise quarterback, and because that's what it is. If the Steelers stink next season, they don't have a quarterback. Justin Fields doesn't turn out to be the guy. If that is the case, then Mike Tomlin's got one more year to prove himself. At that point, his contract is about to be up. I think they'd let his contract expire, to be very honest with you. But I do think there would be a chance at that point that the Steelers do move on from Mike Tomlin, because, I mean, he just went backwards. That being said, it is a lock. And I'm talking hanging out, drinking some beers, putting together that 12:30 p.m. parlay Eastern time, saying, dude, plus 24,000 odds. Lock. And that's how confident I am the Pittsburgh Steelers win 9 games and probably make the playoffs next season.
All righty. That is a wrap for today then.
Awesome. With that said, guys, we are heading out of here. Hopefully Hopefully this mess behind me is situated tomorrow and we aren't late because I'm going to try to do it right before the show. But we appreciate you guys jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, find all of our work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. We will be back tomorrow morning. Remember, Fridays during the offseason are now 9 a.m. And then we'll go back to 4 p.m. during the season. But for right now, let's enjoy our Fridays. We'll be back tomorrow morning. Enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.